I should have been suspicious the day I moved into this neighborhood with perfectly aligned sidewalks, color-synchronized flowers in the planters, and old people walking their dogs as if they were in a margarine commercial. It all seemed too perfect, and perfection, as everyone knows, is a cruel illusion, forcibly maintained by people with too much free time and not enough sense. And that's how I met her, the unofficial liquidator, dictator of fences, and supreme judge of unscheduled garbage cans, the woman who would make it her personal mission to turn my life into a spin-off of Psychotic Women with Clipboards. At first, she just watched me. I could feel her eyes on the back of my head whenever I opened the gate. Once, I swear to all that's holy, she wrote down in her little notebook that I had left the engine running for more than 12 seconds after parking. 12! As if I were an environmental offender. Anyway, I got on with my life. I learned to ignore it, until the day I started to notice a strange car in my driveway. First, it was once, then twice. The next thing I knew, the woman was using my private space as if it were an extension of the community hall's parking lot, which, by the way, she locked with a padlock as if she kept NASA's secrets there. And the most curious thing? She acted as if I had an obligation to accept this. No note, no request, just the good old, "I'm on the HOA board. You don't want to get in trouble, do you?" As if being a member of the HOA was a free pass to be a professional slacker. A social card that turned any trespassing into a community issue. Oh, right. And what else? You want the key to my house too, so you can use the microwave? It got to the point where, on any given Friday, after a hellish day at work, I come home, and there it is. The same car, in my garage. Again. As if it were hers. As if the license plate had been born stuck to the concrete of my property. And to make matters worse, there was an HOA banner hanging from the rearview mirror. Yes, a banner. It had the audacity to mark its territory with the association's crest. All that was missing was a little rope fence and a little sign saying, "Royal Reserve of the Queen of the Suburbs." At that moment, something in me broke. But it wasn't anger. Number anger is very common. It was a mixture of philosophical indignation with a dash of, "I can't believe I'm living through this." It was as if I'd been thrust into a comedy episode where the scriptwriter was having a creative outburst. I went to her door. I knocked once. I knocked twice. Nothing. The third time, an irritated voice shouted from inside, "If it's about the car, I'm at an HOA meeting." HOA meeting. On Friday night. Alone at home. Of course, it must be one of those top-secret meetings with herself and the mirror. I came home, took a deep breath, and sat down on the couch. That's when an idea took shape. First as a seed, then as a storm. If she wanted to play owner of the street, then I could play owner of the chaos. The next morning, I woke up with a single purpose: to lock everything up. I hired a locksmith, changed the lock on the automatic gate, installed a reinforced lock, and put up cameras with an audible warning: "Private property. Parking prohibited. Don't even try." And the best thing, I left her car locked inside. Yes, she had the nerve to park there again while I was asleep. And do you know what I did afterwards? I packed my suitcase. I booked a ticket, and I went to Las Vegas. Because sometimes the best way to deal with the absurd is to let it drown by itself. The feeling of leaving my street behind, with my suitcase in the trunk and a slightly mischievous smile on the corner of my mouth, was one of those small victories that life offers from time to time. I wasn't running away. On the contrary, I was retreating with class from a war that wasn't mine, leaving the minefield locked, guarded, and with the dear lady's car stuck inside my garage as a crooked consolation prize. It was poetic. And Vegas? Vegas was a spectacle, but not the kind of spectacle you see in the movies, with parties and gambling and women in red dresses tripping over heels. It was my kind of show. A hotel with a greasy breakfast, a swimming pool with screaming children, and that silence of not being watched by a lunatic armed with a 68-page regulation on garden decoration. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to explain to anyone why I left the garbage out on a Sunday night. As I walked through the casino, watching old men betting what seemed to be their last pennies. I wondered, has she noticed? Has she tried to leave? Has she called the police? Had she tried to cut the lock with a pair of garden pliers? The image of her, sweating with rage and impotence, trying to deal with her own audacity that had finally gone wrong, was almost therapeutic. I was away for 3 days. Not a week, not a month. 3 lousy days. Enough to reorganize my mental sanity and to ensure that the woman had plenty of time to understand that when you invade someone's garage, as if it were the supermarket parking lot, maybe, just maybe, that someone will one day close the door. Literally. On the second day, my cell phone started blowing up, calls from the HOA, messages with an official tone, a notification informing me that they were urgently trying to contact the owner of Lot 38B. I tried to imagine her face writing that email, her face flushed, her fingers tapping the keyboard as if they were at war, and that aggressive way of disguising fury with bureaucratic words. And like any good suburban villain, she used the neighborhood Facebook group as a stage for her moral collapse. When I finally read the posts on the return flight, I almost choked on the peanuts served by the stewardess. In bold letters, there it was. Does anyone know the address of the owner of the 38B? The garage is locked, and my car is illegally trapped inside. This is carjacking. I'm considering calling the police. I laughed, loudly, in the middle of the flight. A lady in the next row looked at me in awe. I just shook my head and said, to no one in particular, "People have completely lost their minds." She called the police. Of course she did. And the poor bastards showed up, probably expecting to find a robbery, a break-in, or an exotic car captivity. What they found was a 2013 Honda Civic, parked quietly in a private garage, with a legal lock, cameras pointing at every angle, and a visible private property. Unauthorized access will be considered trespassing sign. The police report, which I later obtained through means I prefer not to reveal, was a masterpiece of legal frustration. The lady stated that she had repeatedly parked in the place without formal authorization from the owner. After questioning, she admitted that she had no verbal or written agreement with the owner. She was advised to take civil legal action and not to repeat the behavior. In other words, she was told that she couldn't accuse someone of hijacking a car if it was her car, but it was my property, and she entered without permission. A classic. When I got back, she was waiting for me, standing on the sidewalk, like a statue of unresolved resentment. She looked at me as if I had committed humanity's greatest crime. Not even a good morning. Not even a, can we talk? Just that look that mixes hatred, shame, and the fear of losing control of the world around you. I walked past her as if I were walking past a lamppost, a post that tried to destroy my patience and failed. I opened the gate with my new remote control, parked slowly, savoring every second of the return. And there it was, the Civic, motionless, humiliated, still with the banner hanging from the rearview mirror, as an ironic reminder of the arrogance of others. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The silence spoke for me. She tried to talk. She started babbling justifications, using words like community, collaboration, misunderstanding. I just shook my head, put on my headphones, and went into the house. Nothing more needed to be said. She knew. I knew. And, more importantly, now everyone in the neighborhood knew too. The king of the garage was back, and this time, under lock and key. After his triumphant return, I confess that I spent a few days savoring the silence, a thick, heavy, almost theatrical silence. Not because she had given up, that kind of personality doesn't know what it means to give up, but because, at that moment, she was trying to recalibrate the pieces of her social game, reorganize herself emotionally, and devise a way to come out on top after being exposed in the public square, or rather, in a condominium Facebook group. Of course, it wasn't long before she tried to take revenge. The woman may have lost the battle of the garage, but the war was still raging inside that beige blazer with the gold HOA brooch, and that's when the notes started. Yes, tickets. like a spiteful teenager who didn't get a seat at the popular table in high school. At first, discreet, a little paper folded in four, stuffed in my mailbox. We'd like to remind you of the rules about unregulated fences. Sincerely, HOA. Then, taped to my car window. The grass in your yard exceeds the aesthetic limits of the community. Please trim within 48 hours. It was pathetic. A parade of threats decorated with invented legal terms, as if she had taken an online course in imaginary community law. But what impressed me most was the consistency. Every day, there was a new attempt to provoke me. It was like dealing with a spoiled child with a neighborhood president's diploma. She had the HOA gardener offer me free help, a nice gentleman who showed up at my gate with a lawnmower and a dull smile. I politely declined, and he replied, embarrassed, "She said you were neglecting the aesthetics of the lot, the aesthetics of the plot." That was good. Then came the complaints. I received 3 official notices from the association in 1 week. One about excessive accumulation of dry leaves. Another about outside lights on during the day. Yes, because apparently this is a very serious infraction. And the last about attitudes that harm community spirit. That last one was almost poetic. I felt like a heretic on trial by the suburban Inquisition. Not only that, but she started spreading rumors. They said I was suing the HOA, that I wanted to privatize the street, that I had threatened residents, that I had a basement full of drones spying on everyone. One absurdity after another, manufactured with the creativity of someone who has never had a decent hobby in his life. And the saddest thing? Some people started to believe it. It's always like that. Lies run wild when dressed up in a blazer of false authority. But what she didn't count on was the fact that, unlike her, I have time, resources, and a patience as sharp as a butcher's knife. I decided to respond in the same tone, not with shouting, not with offense, but with first-rate elegance. I bought 2 new outdoor lamps with a presence sensor and very strong white light. I installed them directly facing the front of her house. Every time she opened the door, her entrance was lit up as if a SWAT helicopter was in operation. I set the timer to come on automatically at 6 p.m. and go off at 6 a.m. I did everything in accordance with the manufacturer's invoice and manual. When she tried to complain, I replied with a simple, "Safety is a priority. The community thanks you." I also had custom signs made with phrases like private property, parking only with permission signed by God, and the HOA doesn't live here. Good thing. A polite provocation, but impossible to ignore. I installed them on the fence and in the garage. And of course, I put in cameras with microphones, not for safety's sake, but because I knew she wouldn't be able to resist the urge to let out barbs in front of them. And that was that. One Wednesday, there she was, standing in front of my gate, talking to herself, complaining about the lighting, the signs, the cameras, speaking out loud as if she were in the confessional of a reality TV show. I recorded it all. I saved it with affection. I called it Monologue of the Dethroned Queen, Part 1. In the middle of it all, I found a letter on my doorstep, handwritten on pink paper decorated with little hearts, but with content that seemed to have been dictated by a frustrated lawyer. It asked me to re-establish community harmony and to remove the items that visually pollute the landscape. The letter ended with a quote from Gandhi. Yes, she had the nerve to quote Gandhi after turning my life into a logistical hell. I laughed. I laughed out loud. I laughed with gusto, because there is no finer humor than that of open hypocrisy. So I did what any mature, emotionally stable adult with a sense of justice would do. I took the letter to the monthly HOA meeting. Yes, I attended, by surprise, with the letter in hand and the video of the monologue on my cell phone. I sat in the last chair, let her start the meeting as if nothing was happening, and when the time was right, I raised my hand. "I'd like to share something with the group," I said, and I did. Everything. The letter, the video, the false accusations, the ridiculous notes. The silence was absolute. It was as if everyone was watching the fall of an authoritarian regime being broadcast live. Even the vice president of the association, who has always been a decorative plant at meetings, let out a, "Is this serious?" with a little smile in his corner. She tried to justify herself. She tried to reverse everything, as always. She said it was zeal, concern, community spirit. But the mask had already fallen, and for the first time, I saw something new in her eyes. Insecurity. The certainty of the power she thought she had was beginning to dissolve, and in its place, there was only the discomfort of someone who has finally understood that she has crossed the line and has been caught red-handed. It was a glorious night and, in a way, liberating. After that meeting, the air in the neighborhood changed. You know when you feel that the atmosphere has become lighter, as if a storm had finally gone away and left only the smell of wet earth. That's what it was like. People started greeting me again, some with that complicit smile of someone who watched the HOA soap opera and finally understood who the villain was. Others nodded discreetly, as if they were silently apologizing for having believed in the theater all this time. She, on the other hand, disappeared. Not literally, unfortunately. She didn't move to the desert, as I secretly wished, but she went into an absent presence mode. She walked along the sidewalks like a shadow with sunglasses and a supermarket bag that was always too full to look natural, pretending to be normal, avoiding looking people in the eye. Her aura of suburban royalty evaporated, like open soda left out in the sun. And that's when I realized that, more than having won, I had done what she feared most. I had taken the stage away from her. The woman lived for the spotlight, for attention, for flattery decorated with obedience. When the condominium stopped seeing her as a figure of respect and started seeing her as a walking meme, the war lost its meaning. Because there's no pleasure in bossing around those who laugh at you. The most curious thing was to see how quickly her facade crumbled. All it took was a public scratch on the image for everything that had been sustained by threats and letterheads to turn to dust. Residents began to question old rules, absurd requests, and phantom charges for painting the curbs. She tried to regain control with more emails, all signed with the traditional, sincerely, HOA board. Only now, no one was reading them. A month later, I learned that she had taken a leave of absence for personal reasons from the association. I don't know if it was pressure, shame, or a pure strategy of retreat. All I know is that the gate to her house was closed for longer, the shutters were always down, and the HOA banner mysteriously disappeared from her car. I like to think that she angrily tore it down herself and burned it in a symbolic bonfire, along with all the regulations printed on coated paper. But if you think this story ends with a clean victory and a margarine commercial ending, you've made a big mistake. Because living in a neighborhood like this is no fairy tale. It's not about good guys and bad guys. It's about forced coexistence with people who play the role of landlord as if they were the president of a small country. And even after one of them falls, there's always the risk of another emerging, armed with a ruler, clipboards, and an inflated sense of territorial justice. The truth is that I haven't changed because of her. I just woke up. I discovered that you can't be passive all the time, that giving up too much space allows us to confuse kindness with weakness, and that sometimes locking a garage is more than an act of defense. It's a declaration of limits, ownership, and above all, sanity. Today, my gate is still locked, the signs are still there, and the light sensor still illuminates her facade every time she decides to pick up the mail at night. Not out of spite, but because it's become part of the decoration. A silent reminder of what happens when someone tries to turn someone else's home into a personal parking lot. From time to time, when boredom strikes, I revisit the video of the monologue I recorded that afternoon. Not out of spite, that's over now, but just for fun. There's something satisfying about seeing social justice happening with LED lights and a microphone. It's almost poetic. And Vegas? Well, it became my refuge. I've been twice more since then, without telling anyone. I lock everything up, set the lights, leave a jazz playlist playing on the external cameras just to set the mood, and disappear. Because now, when I want peace, I know exactly where to go. And even better, I know exactly who to run away from. The neighborhood takes its course. The grass grows, the dogs bark, the children ride their bikes. And in the middle of it all, there's a house with a new electronic gate, ironic signs, and a resident who has learned, in the most chaotic way possible, that the only thing more dangerous than a neighbor with no limits is giving her space to believe that she can do anything. So, if you ever move into a place that's too pretty, too organized, where even the flowers seem to have been chosen by committee, beware. Watch out for the woman with the clipboard, because she might not knock on your door. She might just park herself inside. And then, my friend, there will only be one thing left to do. Lock up and go to Las Vegas. Don't forget to leave your like and opinion in the comments.